Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Marianne Pinkston. This is The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston. Welcome in. I am going to bring you today, we're going to talk about inflammation. So inflammation is, no pun intended, a hot topic. Your body has a fire inside and it is burning and it's causing heart disease, dementia, kidney disease, all sorts of things. And so I bring in Dr. Warren Lesser today to help us talk a little bit about inflammation. He's with Magna Pharmaceuticals, who I talk about all the time, one of my sponsors, and I appreciate you guys very much. Welcome in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Well, let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on inflammation.
Okay, so the presentation that I have today is talking about reducing chronic systemic inflammation by making healthy choices. So the first part of this presentation will be talking about the problems with high homocysteine,
Yeah.
and then we're going to talk about some solutions, some choices that we can make, smart choices, to alleviate the problem. Now, the whole theme of this presentation is built around a really good quotation from Nature Medicine. And the author stated, one of the most important medical discoveries of the past 2 decades has been that the immune system and inflammatory processes are involved in not just a few select disorders, but a wide variety of mental and physical health problems that dominate present day morbidity and mortality worldwide. So when I take a break from my busy daily schedule and go back and look at some research, for example, when we prepared for this presentation, I'm reminded of the psalmist who said that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I think about that, especially with the immune system. Although we have made many advances in medical science over the past decades, there's still so much we just don't know.
Right.
And this is a fascinating subject. But homocysteine, there's no way that I'm going to state that homocysteine is the panacea for all systemic chronic inflammation problems, but it's important. And that's one of the things that we can do is control homocysteine. So homocysteine is implicated in SCI. I'll just refer to it as SCI, systemic chronic inflammation. It's a broad subject. There's a lot of diseases, as you mentioned, but we'll focus today on three common ones that aren't talked about too often: sarcopenia, metabolic syndrome, and then mental issues that stem from SCI, including depression and cognitive decline, especially as we get older. And then the importance of homocysteine or too much homocysteine in liver health and also in glutathione production. Glutathione is the main scavenger of free radicals in our bodies. Very important.
Very
And then, of
important
course,
enough.
close with making some smart lifestyle choices. But to go back for just a minute to kind of recap the last presentation in one slide, here are 4 bullet points that I think are really relevant and important for us to keep in mind. High homocysteine levels come from a deficiency of B6, B12, and actually B9, which is folate in the diet. And this comes from consuming too much red meat, too much dairy, some aging, bad lifestyle habits, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase called MTHR deficiency. And there are some studies now, somewhat controversial, that say that too much exercise, aerobic exercise, increases homocysteine. Well, my answer for that is, well, if you're an aerobic exercise enthusiast, then you better make sure you're getting enough B vitamins in your diet. So this is a really strong statement that comes out of Austin Pharmacology and Therapeutics, and it says a high homocysteine level is the main culprit, and not the only culprit, for brain and vascular diseases, strokes risk, coronary artery disease, arteriosclerosis, and could already augment, or I say make worse, the depleted levels of nitric oxide in diabetic patients, which exacerbates their peripheral neuropathy. So it makes their peripheral circulation even worse because we have less nitric oxide. Nitric oxide causes vasodilatation. So if you have decreased nitric oxide, you have more vasoconstriction. And so they say we actually live in a state of systemic vasoconstriction with less glutathione production. So that stems from too much homocysteine in the diet. And then the mental or cognitive conditions associated with high homocysteine levels: stress, depression, cognitive impairment, dementia, Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, and autism, and there are others as well. So the last statement here is that the proportion of B12 and folate to homocysteine is inversely associated. So when we look at really the process of metabolism of homocysteine, we go from methionine. So methionine is an essential amino acid that we get from our diet. A lot of it's from proteins, red meat, poultry, pork, nuts, soybeans, and methionine is necessary for us to be alive. And it then is metabolized into homocysteine, and then the byproduct, the end product that we really want is cysteine, because cysteine reduces systemic inflammation, improves liver health, and improves glutathione in the context of this presentation. And of course, we need these elements right here: vitamin B9, vitamin B9, B6, B12, and then the MTHFR enzyme to make this happen. So the conclusion here is that the less cysteine we have and the more homocysteine, we have more systemic chronic inflammation, decreased liver health, and less glutathione. So let's talk first about systemic chronic inflammation as one of the ramifications for too much homocysteine. And I go to this chart that comes out of Nature Medicine, which is really a good chart. And they talk about on the left side here some of the causes of systemic chronic inflammation. And we have, of course, diet, which we've just mentioned, and then problems with the gut, with imbalance in the probiotics, prebiotics, the biological organisms in our gut, and then, of course, obesity, being physically inactive, chronic infections. They show a tick here. The secondary Lyme disease can have some bad health consequences as unless it's treated. It is treatable, as we know. And then down here, disturbed sleep, and then xenobiotics are what we find in our environment, like petroleum distillates, hydrocarbons, pesticides. Some of those we can kind of stay away from, but we cannot control our environment totally, so that our bodies are susceptible to all kinds of endogenous things that happen that we put into our bodies, and exogenous factors that then lead to, over time, especially as our immune systems get overworked, they lead to a number of diseases. We talk about cancer a lot, associated with systemic chronic inflammation. And we also talked last time a lot about cardiovascular disease. But in autoimmune diseases like, for example, Crohn's disease or rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, these are also implicated from SCI. Neurodegenerative diseases such as ALS. Let's see, those are diseases that come from inflammation, chronic inflammation, and then sarcopenia, and then of course just wearing out the immune system as we get older, called immunosenescence. Right. So what we want to talk about today is just zero in on three of these: metabolic syndrome, and then mental conditions, cognitive decline, and depression. And then what is sarcopenia, which is common, especially in elderly adults. People don't talk about it too often.
As we age, lose our muscle, right?
What's that? I'm sorry?
As we lose our muscle, we age. That is the definition of aging.
Exactly, yes. Exactly right. So these are the three areas of focus. And so let's start with SCI. It is, as you said, it's an involuntary loss of skeletal muscle and strength. What's fascinating to me is that this starts as early as the fourth decade of life. So in the 40s. And then as it goes in a linear fashion, so that by the time we reach the 80s, we've lost 50% of our muscle mass. Right. 50%. That's incredible. Yeah. So I did a little math on this. And so a 150-pound adult, if you take 60% is muscle mass. So that's 90 pounds, right? And then you lose half of that. You're losing 45 pounds of muscle by the time you're 80, plus your baseline mass. So a 150-pound person is going to 105 pounds. That's a drastic reduction. Right. And what do you get from that? You go down here and you see that there's a loss of function, there's a disability, there's frailty. You see that in older people. And you pop back up here. And the problem is that many people are frail, but they replace the lost muscle weight with a fat weight gain. So they're frail and they don't really look that frail, but they're weak underneath. And especially when they're trying to carry extra weight, that's a compound problem. So then sarcopenia, as we get older, then our immune systems get tired. and they release more pro-inflammatory molecules from cells. So it actually worsens systemic chronic inflammation. And then insulin resistance, we know that we can't metabolize glucose as well. Tiredness falls, and then maybe mortality, we die before we need to.
Right.
And so sarcopenia is a real problem. We can prevent it or at least mitigate some of the effects of, or mitigate the incidence of sarcopenia and the extent of sarcopenia with some lifestyle changes, lifestyle choices early on.
Right.
So the second condition that we talk about is metabolic syndrome today. Metabolic syndrome is marked by high blood sugar, high blood pressure, blood pressure, high lipids. Mostly they're talking about here high LDL, and then a large waist size. I don't know about what it is in women, but for men it's 40 inches or more.
Mm-hmm.
They call this somebody said it's called the Dunlop disease, where your belly Dunlops over your belt.
Exactly.
And as I've gotten older, I noticed even after Christmas, where you have those butter cookies, that was kind of getting too many in my diet.
Yeah.
That when you gain a little weight, that it's more pronounced. You have less capacity for food because we have more visceral fat underneath. And of course, the last hallmark symptom or factor in metabolic syndrome is low HDL. We want high HDL cholesterol in our bodies, in our bloodstream. Yes. Now, the good news is that weight loss, exercise, and healthy diet, of course, if you smoke, stop smoking, don't drink too much alcohol. These are healthy choices you can make to kind of ameliorate the metabolic syndrome, actually five signs and symptoms here. Now, what happens with metabolic syndrome? What can it lead to? What's the danger of it? Well, stroke, heart disease, we've talked about that already. But organ damage is another common issue. You mentioned kidneys, and then, of course, the liver, gallbladder, type 2 diabetes that leads to type 2 diabetes in many cases, and then issues with thinking and memory. So that leads us to our third topic of SCI that we want to talk about, which is cognitive decline. When we think about cognitive decline, we often connect cognitive decline with remembering, with memory. But actually, if we have elderly parents or other people in our lives, that we can actually see that there's a lack of judgment in language.
Absolutely.
There's maybe a social lack of judgment that comes where their affect is off, where they maybe are not as perceptive as to what other people are saying. Maybe they're more insensitive because they're cognitively impaired.
Right.
So it's not only the memory, but it's learning, remembering, and using judgment.
And bad money choices. A lot of times making very bad, financial decisions and inability to calculate and things like that too.
Right. Oh, for sure. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And especially they can be more susceptible to people who prey
Yes.
on the elderly. They're less suspecting.
Absolutely.
What's interesting, I find this comment right here very interesting, that it's not a normal part of aging. Cognitive impairment is not.
Right.
And we know older people that are sharp as tacks, right?
Absolutely.
It's not inevitable. And
Right.
why is it?
Thank you for saying that. Yes. Absolutely.
It's because of lifestyle, and it's just a whole lifelong effects of making choices that, like you said, Dr. Pinkston, were just bad choices. So the other thing I was going to say here is that we were talking about folate levels, and what's interesting is that they have been found to be inversely, or that they're not they're inversely correlated with dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
Yes.
So lower folate means you have more dementia, more cognitive decline, and maybe a higher propensity or chance of getting Alzheimer's, which I think is significant, especially today, since we talk about Alzheimer's so much.
Absolutely. Right.
So those are three conditions that we kind of highlighted with respect to systemic chronic inflammation.
Yes.
The next part we want to talk about is liver health.
Right.
And what does too much homocysteine have to do with liver health? Well, there's two acronyms here, NAFLD and NASH. So NAFLD means non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So this is a fatty liver that's that occurs from diet and from lack of exercise, has nothing to do with alcohol. And then NASH is an offshoot of NAFLD, which is characterized by inflammation of the liver becoming damaged, and then too much fat in the liver, so much fat that it can't function properly. That's NASH. Now, the good news is that weight loss can reduce the consequences of NAFLD and NASH. And fibrosis in the liver becomes hard. It doesn't function as well. And it's really interesting that has to do that if we just would lose weight, that our livers would be healthier. And this is pretty good. It comes from the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Disease in April of 2021. So this is pretty recent. This is a recent publication right here,
right.
And a good publication as well, a good source. So the what's interesting with respect to liver function, I found this interesting. This comes out of the Journal of Hepatology, and this is 2021, so this is also recent. They talk about the fact that there's a gut-liver-brain axis. So the old saying, "You are what you eat."
Absolutely.
What goes into the gut affects the liver, which affects the brain. And so you basically, if you connect these two dots right here, gut to depression. I mean, you want a good mood, you want a bad mood. What are you eating?
Exactly.
It's not quite that simple. It's not quite that simple, but
it almost is.
Really, I mean,
yes.
As we're taking a very complex system that's really hard to understand, we're really simplifying it.
Absolutely.
But they make the statement here that gut-derived systemic inflammation is a driver of depression, especially in chronic liver disease. So we're not able to metabolize that much. So I'm really moving through quickly.
You are moving quickly, and actually we're going to have to take a very short break here in just a second, and I want everybody to listen in. We got a little commercial that highlights Dr. Lesser and Magna Pharmaceuticals here, because I talk a lot about a product called DeNovo, which is something that you make, and it has that methylated B vitamin as well as methylfolate. I take it on a regular basis, saved my life, and is saving the lives of a lot of other patients. So we'll let them listen in for just a second, and we'll be right back.
Depression, anxiety, low energy, weakness, these are just some symptoms of low B12 levels. And the absorbable B12 folate supplement that's helping people declare victory over depression symptoms is DeNovo Plus B12 by Magna Pharmaceuticals. Patients with symptoms of depression often exhibit low levels of folate and vitamin B12. The human body needs sufficient folate intake to produce the essential neurotransmitters serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. These neurotransmitters alleviate feelings of sadness, anxiety, and gloom. What makes DeNovo Plus B12 so successful? DeNovo Plus B12 contains readily absorbable folate and B12. That means it's more successful at correcting the root cause of your deficiency, not just the symptoms. Whether you are suffering with low energy, depression, fatigue, or anxiety, you owe it to yourself to learn more at magnaweb.com. That's magnaweb.com. Please let us know at checkout that you heard about DeNovo Plus B12 on The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for coming back in. We are talking with Dr. Lesser today from Magna Pharmaceuticals. And I'm intense. I'm just watching and trying to keep up. This is amazing information about chronic inflammation in the body. We talked a little bit about metabolic syndrome, and we're starting to hit on the liver now. Liver disease is rampant, especially here in South Texas. And so, please do continue. Let's hear more about this liver disease.
Okay, well, thank you. So what I was saying is that from the Journal of Hepatology in 2021, they talked about the gut-liver-brain axis and the fact that what we eat basically affects our livers, and then our brain functions.
Correct.
But how it can lead to depression. So food choices are really important. And the last item I want to talk about with respect to
too much
humus. I'm sorry?
My favorite, glutathione.
Yeah. Okay, so this is I love this statement right here. It says that glutathione and its cellular and mitochondrial level. So mitochondria is a source of energy. It's the powerhouse of the cell.
Yes.
And not only does it power our cells, but so our cells power our tissues and our organs and our entire body function. but the glutathione is highly associated with health and longevity. So when you have, let's go back. If you have too much homocysteine and your cysteine production is reduced, then you're not going to have as much nitric oxide.
Right.
If you don't have as much nitric oxide, you're not going to have as much glutathione in your body.
Right.
So why is that important? Well, not only is that statement important about health and longevity, but what role does glutathione play? Well, it's the main scavenger of free radicals in the body. It removes oxidating stressors, mercury, POPs, other substances that we take in that cause cancer, cardiac disease, and a whole host of diseases. So you want glutathione because you want it to clean up the free radicals, ROS, and some of the other talks about down here, endogenous and exogenous reactive oxygen species. So the thing that I want to come down to on this last bullet point down at the bottom is the fact that they state that cysteine is the rate limiting step for the production of glutathione. So how do we connect that? Well, if you're stuck in the middle with homocysteine because your body doesn't have enough B vitamins, B6, B9 in the form of folate, or B12, or methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme, then you're not going to get to the cysteine level. You're going to be stuck with too much homocysteine, and you're not going to get enough glutathione, or you're going to get less glutathione.
Right.
So this is really important when it comes to this discussion about homocysteine.
Absolutely.
So where are we now in this presentation? Well, talked about systemic chronic inflammation, sarcopenia, metabolic syndrome, the mental effects of SCI, including depression and cognitive decline. Talked a little bit about liver health, and we talked about the importance of glutathione, kind of touched on that. So let's talk about a few lifestyle choices that we can make
Right.
that help reduce homocysteine, reduce systemic chronic inflammation, improve liver health, and improve glutathione.
Right.
So this is a pretty cool chart. And I think I stole this. Where did I get this from? Endocrine Review. Okay. So what they show here is that when we exercise, that myokines are released. And myokines not only make our muscle cells larger and our muscle tissues larger, make us stronger.
Right.
But when we exercise, especially with resistance exercise, we're talking about using some weights, that myokines are released, improves your skin, and improves your clarity in thinking, helps reduce fat tissue, and improves your local response to injury through macrophage empowerment.
Yeah.
Your hormones, the GI tract, your pancreas, your liver, helps your bone formation, and helps your circulation. I mean, these are huge. And so what are myokines? So they're peptides that are produced by muscles, right? Myo muscle. And they have autocrine. So that means that those myokines affect the function of muscle cells, the cells around them, paracrine, or endocrine, meaning the whole body. And I love this part right here where it says myokines mediate communication with other organs.
Mm-hmm.
And we already talked about in the last slide about the brain, the adipose tissue, liver, gut, pancreas. But they also talked about the fact that, of course, hypertrophy we didn't mention, but in this context, it means the growth of the muscle tissue, and then also the limiting or reducing of tumor growth. So I'm getting this. So exercise, especially resistance exercise, can help my overall body inflammation because it talks about IL-6 down here, mediating having anti-inflammatory effects and tumor growth.
Mm-hmm.
So not only does exercise help almost every body organ, right? But
Right.
it also could help reduce tumors, and because it has anti-inflammatory effects.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of studies out about exercise. And I
Yes.
mentioned one earlier where they talk about, well, there's some studies that say that aerobic exercise or too much increases homocysteine. I mean, really, when you look at the literature overall, physical fitness reduces cardiovascular risk by up to 50% in middle-aged
Absolutely.
people.
There's always an
and-
outlier out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Always.
Oh, I mean, aerobic or resistance training. And
Right.
this study, I really like this study because this is well controlled. Didn't have a lot of subjects, but it was well controlled. And this is indicative of a lot of the research that's out there. In
Yes.
this study, researchers showed that if people on a treadmill 3 times a week for 20 minutes at 60 to 75% of the heart rate for 12 weeks, reduced homocysteine, reduced lipoprotein A, LDL, and raised HDL. So I mean that's remarkable.
That's remarkable.
You're talking about 12 weeks, 3 times a week. That's 36
Absolutely.
weeks, and you get those kinds of results. So
Absolutely.
moderate exercise here is the key.
Absolutely.
So exercise is really important. Let's conclude with a few things choices that we can make.
We have
Trying to go
about a
with
minute and a half left there.
Okay, good. So make a choice for regular exercise. Skeletal muscle produces anti-inflammatory myokines and cytokines. Eat a balanced diet, 5 servings of fruit and vegetables. Use olive oil, which is anti-inflammatory. When we have a craving for junk food, try to eat more veggies, less fatty meat, less dairy, and less junk food. And then the foods rich in folate include our green leafy vegetables, spinach, kale, broccoli, asparagus, citrus fruits. I know that fruits with berries are really, like berry fruits are also really important.
Yes.
And then to make sure we're getting enough absorbable B vitamins, we recommend, when I take myself, a quality methylcobalamin is the only form of B12 that crosses the blood-brain barrier. Same for L-methylfolate. We have 2 products, the Nova Plus B12 and Nufola. The Nova Plus B12 is more heavily weighted towards mental cognitive function, Nufola towards circulation. And we didn't talk about this time, but omega-3 is huge for anti-inflammation.
Absolutely.
And hopefully, if we do these things, we'll be able to maintain homocysteine levels at a healthy level, reduce systemic chronic inflammation, increase liver health, increase glutathione, and hopefully potentiate our longevity.
A long and wonderful life. Dr. Lesser, you are always amazing. Thank you so very, very much. This is all great advice, and you can find a lot of these things at magnaweb.com. So please go take a look because he's worked very hard at formulating these things for you. Dr. Lesser, we reached the end. I appreciate you as always. I think we're going to bring you in and talk some omegas next time. Let's do that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, as always. Everybody have a great week.